It's Pastor David, and I'm here with our monthly financial update, January to June, half the year. So let me put this on the screen and let's take a look. So you'll see here the overview financial report that we give to our leadership every month. And across the top line, what you'll find here is our pledged giving. That is the giving that people say they make a commitment to. For 6 months, we expected 615,000. We've 611. So we're pretty close, about 1% that we're expecting, and we're appreciative of that. That's about that's about $4,000. Unpledged, that is the offering plate, money that comes in that's not pledged. We budgeted 225,000. We've received about 222,000, about 1%. So again, very grateful for the accuracy in budgeting in this piece. We basically took the numbers from last year. And speaking of that, if you run this figure all the way over to the year to date from last year, what you'll see is that our unpledged giving is $30,000 higher than it was in the first 6 months in 2020. That's positive news, about 16%. Unpledged, we pledged, expected less pledging based upon the pledge report. Unpledged is up. And so we're grateful for that. And thank you for those that are coming into the family, those that are joining the family, who continue, those who have been a part of the family, who continue to support the ministry. Third line of revenue is other revenues. That is like the preschool revenue, the Studio 150, the Anua revenue. That's all kind of lumped together. Year to date, we expected about 1.8. We've got about 1.725. There's a differential about $85,000, 5%. And we'll explain where that's coming from in a minute. Compared to last year, this time, first 6 months, about $350,000 less than this year. So that's growth. Now there's a caveat, and that caveat is that you'll recall that when we went to do the budget this year, we asked the foundation of our church for a one-time grant of $300,000 that would allow us to bring ministries online and help us grow into the budget. And we were given that. This other revenue includes half of that grant. So of the $354,000, $355,000 that were positive over last year, $150,000 of that is that grant from the foundation. So that still leaves $200,000 more in other revenue than we did the first 6 months. And that makes sense. That speaks to the reopening of these ministries and so forth. Bottom line, total revenue, you'll see there, budget 2.6, actual 2.56, about $92,000 off, primarily from that, all but $7,000 from that other revenue, these ministries that bring revenue in to our ministry. We'll come back to that. Underneath the revenue is our expenses: gracious host, passionate seekers, vibrant family, Christ-like servants. These are the areas or pillars that we group our ministries in. The leaders, the lay leaders of each of the ministry teams in our church, about 25, come together in groups and plan their vision and their budgeting together. And this is reflective of that. You'll see that every pillar, with the exception of vibrant family, is underspending. And we'll come back to vibrant family in a minute. That's primarily through the preschools. You'll see that in a second. But actually, when you add in labor and staffing and administration and so forth, what you're going to find is that we're about $38,000 off of a 1.15, well, actually favorable. We're about $37,000 favorable, on a $1.155 million expense budget for the first 6 months. Now, part of that needs to be noted is that electricity this year has, as you no doubt know, completely increased, almost 30% over last year. We've had a higher electric bill, and while there's some of that is wattage, there is more wattages or more in the building. That is, some of it's just increased costs, and so we wrestle with fixed costs. We also wrestle with increased costs in staffing. As you know from your world, in the business world, that it costs more to have employees these days. People are commanding higher salaries as we replace teachers, as we replace natural transition. To hire the next in costs 20% more. And so we're continuing to wrestle with that. But bottom line, you'll see here is that our budgeted for expenses was 2.644 million, and we've underspent by $68,000. We've actually spent 2.575. So great news in terms of we're underspending our budget by about $70,000. We've under revenued our budget by $92,000 for a net of about $23,000 out of 2.644 million. Now, and that means, as you'll see on this net total line, that we expected through the first 6 months to be $8,000 in the black, and we are about $16,000 in the red. Let me explain some of how that breaks down. So on these notes underneath, which Matt so graciously gives us, you'll see that other revenue, line 2, that MSEE and TCA, our preschools, have increased their revenue. MSE is $40,000 positive revenue, TCA 10,000, but then we have some that are under revenue. Now TCA and MSE, while they've increased revenue, you'll also see down here an expenses, line 4, are overspending what their budget is too. And this is just part of growth reemerging under COVID. And so, well, you know, it's kind of it's positive, and yet there's also some extra expenses. One of the places I want you to see is ANUA in line 2 here underneath the budget, $74,000 under revenue, but they're also line 4 underspending their expenses. Line 5, excuse me, 60,000. So about 14,000. The way ANUA works is they bring over money when they spend it out of the budget from another account, which they raise it, and they work to being a net zero on the budget at the end of the year. Outside, the church provides a staff person for ANUA, but outside of that staff person and some of the other supports in-house, ANUA tries to work towards net zero. And they've had an agricultural business that they are opening up, but due to COVID has been delayed. And so that's part of what's happened. Certainly ANUA could always use more. Like the church, we welcome more people to help support this wonderful and powerful ministry of transformation that's highly relational and brings change in the world. They continue to look for people to help support that as churches do in COVID, but their budget reflects really kind of a delay in launching this agricultural business. You'll see here, as we mentioned the preschools, that Brain Fitness, BFA, line 2, is under revenued by about $26,000. And you'll see that their under expending is about $17,000, so a net of about $9,000 upside down. BFA is going through a transition where the parent organization, Brain Fitness Inc., which is not a part of our church, we're a local chapter, is going to close and has asked the church to take on the Brain Fitness ministry. We started the ministry grew, it launched out of our church into its own organization. Now they want to come back and say, can we be a part of the church as the church's ministry? And then the church leadership is really considering this, or we're weighing this. What does this look like for the resources? How does this fit into our ministry to make disciples of Jesus Christ? We have some great lay people working on this to figure out how it fits into the calling for the future days. But you can see here how that checks and balances between under revenue and underspending as we emerge back into post-COVID. So overall, what I see is a favorable report. It's one that requires vigilance. We continue to watch to make sure we're underspending to balance some of the adjustments with revenue. It's pretty accurate in terms of our offering plate and what we thought we would be and where we would be. And it is one that has to be addressed because it does include that one-time grant from the foundation of our church for the $300,000. And we are pretty much accurate in saying that we've needed that, and that is really what's floating kind of the budget, the level that we're at. And so if we don't, we'll need to do some right sizing of ministry at the end of the year. But beyond that, really, truly, we're pretty much even in terms of what we thought revenue would be. And that's good news. I think there's many churches that are closing and struggling, and we continue to move forward. And so I'm encouraged by that, especially with all the good things that are happening right now. It's Vacation Bible School Week. We have 160 kids, twice as many kids as last year, and 90 volunteers, students and adults. And that's phenomenal. We could have had more kids if we had more volunteers, but Pastor Leah and the volunteer team are doing an amazing job. And it's really fun this week to see a great Vacation Bible School. That's growth. and reemergence. Our students and their families returned from a wonderful week at Appalachian Service Project, a mission trip up to Virginia, and just really did a great job representing us and Christ in this world and serving people. And that's just exciting to see that. 2 weeks, we're going to get back into our renewed ministry with the Family Promise, where we house people in transition at the church. We have a lay team in charge of that, and that is moving forward. So that's great to see that come back online. So things are happening. We're continuing to move forward. The youth group continues to grow. And so just really positive and seeing some great movement. Our leadership council and the leadership of the different ministry teams will be meeting in August to work through some of their preparations for the budget for next year, how they begin to see setting priorities in light of what our budget situation is. And so please be in prayer for them. In the meantime, thank you for all that you're doing, support this church ministry, all you're doing to be servants of God in that way. I think of the parable or the story in the Gospel of Mark of Jesus feeding the 5,000. Remember, 5,000 men, that means many more. And all the disciples can come up with is 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Now Jesus prays over it, and he takes the fish and bread, and he breaks it, and then he gives it to the disciples to distribute. And we're distributors of the goodness that God has given to us. And I hope that you see in this that we're being faithful in our distribution of the goodness that God is giving to our family. Thank you for all that you're doing to help us with that. Thank you for your interest in this. Thank you for your support. And thank you for your presence in our family. We'll see you in church. God bless.